Hi, everyone, and welcome to today's roundtable session. My name is Ellen Smoley, and I'm the head of marketing here at Iron Horse. This is our second in our roundtable series of 3, where we take a closer look at key growth challenges identified in our recent survey, which will be linked here in the chat. Our first session focused on content marketing, where leaders from Own24 and Netline discussed the importance of creating content for the full customer journey. I encourage you to take a look and go back and watch this session, which we'll also link in the chat for you. Now, I'd love to get into today's session, which is focused on intent. First, I'd like to introduce you to our 3 speakers. We have Uzair Dada, founder and CEO of Iron Horse. Next, we have Jackie Palmer, VP of Product Marketing at Demandbase. And finally, Steve Nimick, CRO at TechTarget. Welcome, you 3, and Uzair, take it away.
I am so excited to be here and be part of this discussion. And Steve and Jackie, thank you again for taking the time to partner with us to talk about this topic. You guys are both part of 2 companies we respect a lot. We use a lot for a lot of our customers. So I'm super excited. And intent, I think, is a topic that's next to our kids and wives, very near and dear to us and family. So, I feel like I talk about this more than I talk about my kids. So it's a really fun topic to talk about.
Don't tell them that.
Exactly. And when my kids are starting to get excited about intent, I know I'm doing something right. That's awesome. I wanted to sort of start out by kind of the conversation by sort of looking at some stats for a B2B enterprise tech survey we just did this summer. The big stat was that 99% of the respondents we talked to, and it was a pretty big sample size, I think over almost 400 people in B2B tech, said that they're using at least one intent provider to identify accounts that are in market for their solutions. I don't know what that number was last year, but I can tell you it was probably not 99%. I mean, that's crazy, but that means it's ubiquitous. It's always part of almost every conversation. And the stat on the right was actually even more surprising, that I didn't think it would be that high, but that the fact that it is, that 61% of the people are using 2 or more intent platforms. That means it's becoming core. We've sort of now become, this is part of our B2B mainstay. But yet, if you talk to marketing leaders and you talk to them about how they're using it and what they're using intent for, it's sort of, there still is a lot of struggle and challenges about, am I getting value from it? Am I doing the right thing? And so forth. So I thought what would be kind of cool is maybe, now that we know that intent data is core, and we know that people are starting to take advantage of it, maybe we start with a polling question about how are people using and where are people using the intent data the most as part of the purchasing and buyer's journey. I don't know if Jackie and Steve, you guys have any thoughts kind of in terms of what you think people's answers will be?
I mean, my guess is not every single stage, but I'm hoping to be pleasantly surprised that it's more than I expect.
I would assume that it's probably openly more in the awareness and evaluation stage, depending on some of the different types of tactics that they leverage right now. I will say, though, that I think that there's a massive opportunity for folks to further evaluate as you think more down funnel. And that's certainly something we can talk through today. Yep,
we're going to get into that for sure.
So from a polling perspective, right now, you've given it a bit. I think you're right, Steve, that awareness and evaluation is really majority, so 57% awareness, 30% evaluation, few folks in the consideration state, and almost non-existent bottom of the funnel, right? So we are over-indexed on sort of as we sort of would think about the I'd call them basic or standard use cases that you would think about. So talking about that, I think let's start with you guys, and maybe Jackie with you first. And I'd love to take sort of a two-way angle. The first one is, how are you guys as awesome leaders in the space using this technology and this strategy for intent data for your own marketing strategies? So you being a marketing person, why don't we start with you? But how do you guys at Demandbase use intent data for your own use cases?
Yeah, I mean, we try to use it throughout that full cycle, right? Definitely on the awareness side, definitely on the evaluation and consideration side, but we also even use it for, retention and upsell, cross-sell opportunities. So for marketers, the biggest thing that we do, I think, is awareness campaigns to sort of, get the things, the intent that we use to trigger both digital campaigns and email campaigns, driving people from an ad campaign into an email campaign, driving people, to the website, all those things that we do for awareness. We also use orchestration to sort of automatically set up triggers to move them further on down into the funnel, and other things like that. At the consideration stage, we do a lot in terms of leveraging product comparisons with G2, Trust Radius, things like that. We also look at a lot of things that we put up there for our sales people, our SDRs and our sellers, but we're working on that from a marketing perspective. And so that's, sort of taking our campaign messaging and our SDR messaging and tailor that content to the intent signals that we're seeing in that consideration and evaluation stages. I also, as a product marketer, use the intent that we see more in general to help us create what sort of product materials or marketing materials we might want to have at our fingertips to provide during that sales process as well. Or even, sort of our content marketing team comes up with different content that we're using on the website based on intent that, trends that we're seeing overall. That's probably the biggest stuff that we do from a marketing perspective. And then Steve can talk about sales, but we use it in the sales cycle as well.
Awesome. Yeah. So Steve, you are the leader of sales for TechTarget and have a big team. And it'd be awesome to hear sort of, maybe you can start with sort of the marketing to sales partnership.
Yep.
At TechTarget, but really, if you could say, like, how does it flow through from marketing to sales, and what are you guys doing?
Yeah, so I think it's important, right, when you think about selling today, right, it's less about, call it intuition, and it's more about being a data-driven seller, all right?
Mm-hmm.
When you think about the aspect of what a good progressive seller is trying to do today, they're saying, hey, how do I map my territory? How do I prioritize the accounts that specifically might be in market? Because here's the reality, right? We don't have endless amounts of hours, just like anybody. You've got pipeline numbers, you've got production numbers that you're trying to figure through. If you are misrepresenting, you're not prioritizing the right accounts, quite frankly, you're behind. Another thing that you're trying to do is you're trying to say, all right, if I'm talking to Uzair, if I'm talking to Jackie, I've only got a limited amount of time, as well as this whole research path, 70% of it, 80% of it's already gone on with the prospect. So if I get on the phone with him or her and I'm not educated or I'm not informed about what I want to talk about, well, I'm naturally behind. And if other sales reps are leveraging data and they're leveraging intent and they're having more productive conversations, I'm essentially on my back foot. So I think it's important to frame like what sellers can do and even what TechTarget does with intent data, because as a seller, you're always trying to prioritize your time as well as have more meaningful conversations with where there are truly relevant opportunities, be it in the immediate or upcoming. So, things that we do with intent data, and this is where, kind of go into what makes intent very powerful for today for organizations, there's got to be good sales and marketing alignment, I believe, to start, right? So myself and our CMO, right, we'll look at accounts that are coming to our web pages, right? Similar to what Jackie had just shared around trying to organize as well as prioritize accounts that are right now market. On the TechTarget front, even with our ecosystem and Bright Talk, we have specific first-party data on marketers that are right now researching on go-to-market topics, right? So we can feed that information directly to our sellers so that when they're making their outbound, they're not just calling cold or stale names. They're actually calling prospects, potential customers, or even current customers that are right now researching around very specific things. And we know this, right? When you leverage intent data and specifically user-specific information combined with account-level data, you're going to see increases in response rates, right? So marketing is using intent data to further prime the pump to create more opportunities for our sellers. And then we've built some mechanisms internally where if it's a user, if it's a marketer, if it's somebody that we want to speak to, and they're actively engaged right now with content, We see the content, we inform our sellers in real time, and then we expect a certain amount of specific follow-up to leverage that information.
So I think you guys both talked about some pretty awesome stuff that goes beyond the basics, right? To me, the basics are I use it for media, better media targeting, right?
Yep.
So we all know media has a huge perception of waste. So if I can target better, if I can use intent data to sort of be much more prescriptive and personalized and almost anti-creepy, because people have a feeling that you're using intent to be creepy. I almost feel intent is helping us be not creepy, right? Because it's telling us what to do and what not to do, rather than just wildly chasing, which is what we are used to doing. So I think that's one core use case. The second one that almost everyone's using is the sales one, what Steve, you mentioned, which is account prioritization. How do I make sure that we don't sort of use the yellow pages approach and even the old school, I don't know if it's old school, it's still school. Like today, I think most sales organizations still have territory assignments and account assignments and sort of like, yeah, that's who you're going to go after, rather than saying, is this even right? Are we making the right decision in account prioritization? So to me, those are two core use cases. So let's do another quick poll on those cases are great, but why are people still struggling with using intent data to do more than just that? You guys, talked about some pretty awesome use cases that I want to unpeel more, but I feel every time I talk to our customers that are very large companies, enterprises, and are trying to do more, they're sort of kind of stuck to that. And that's kind of all they know. So what are the gaps? And I think it'd be interesting. So, any thoughts, Jackie and Steve, while we're waiting for sort of answers?
No, I think you hit the nail right on the head. There's a lot of people that are sort of just scratching that surface. And I think one of the things that we're highlighting here today is how we can go deeper. How can people leverage multiple content sources, multiple intent sources? How can they leverage things in different channels, perhaps, to take that data and then make their other channels more informed? But I think you're right. I think people are just getting started in many ways.
I would probably say, Uzair, that I see a lot of customers today, right? They love the promise of intent, and they think that intent's going to bring them to the holy grail, right? Which is, I'm going to immediately know, quite frankly, that this account's in market, and then immediately, right, it's going to create an opportunity. And I think to your point, like, intent is insanely smart because it's refined and directional if you've got the right data, right? Because you're no longer having the fish amongst the sea. You're putting your net in the right spot. I think particularly, right, to give I think that marketers need to refine, test, and change their strategy more, right? I don't think that it's a clear, straight shot from day one all the way to the end based off of where you think you are and where you're going to go. I think, to some of what Jackie was mentioning, right, we see more and more customers today leveraging intent information to even build quality, good content, right? I think where you started is intent becomes more mainstream and more organizations build their process and their outcomes based off of leveraging intent data to build propensity modeling and go after accounts. I mean, you know this, I'm sure a lot of the folks on the webinar know this, that the battleground for where all this research is happening, it's happening online, right? So if you don't even have good content to intercept those buyers as they go through their research path, you're behind. You're absolutely behind because somebody else might be leveraging that intent data way more prescriptively to provide that audience something that they're very interested in.
And so, I think that's a key. Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead, Jackie. I think it's.
I was just going to say, I think that's a key sort of second phase intent use case that I think people, once they've gotten started, like you said, with account prioritization, really figuring out how to use intent to drive content, both marketing content and even sort of emails that you might be using within your sales processes. It's going to be a second phase, I hope, for most people. Like how can we use the intent that we're seeing to better inform our marketing content creation process, our sales content creation process, and then ultimately infuse that throughout the whole organization.
I think it's great. So
you could even say sorry. I was just going to you could even say that you could take it into the product development process too, 100%, and use intent 100%. to prioritize your product feature development and your product development.
So I think it's great. So phase 3. I think it's awesome. So the winner is the first one. the most 63% of the people are using it for the basic use cases, the two that we talked about.
Yep.
About 16% it not using intent platforms. They want to use it. 13% sort of have invested in platforms but don't have the skill set. That's a very, very key one. And the other ones sort of have it, but they don't know how to sort of prioritize and focus. So not surprising to see it, like kind of where that is. So I think this is great. So I think that the next area we should talk about is what is intent and what can it operationalize? You guys hit on a lot of cool cases, right? So to me, it's like we are so auto-tuned to media and account prioritization, but to me, intent, I tell our sort of sales and marketing teams is the ability to be a fly on the wall, to listen inside a conversation and glean in and lean in. So you now are more adept at kind of sort of focusing on what to talk about. So it's the ability to declutter. Mm-hmm. That's the first thing. But if you sort of think about where people struggle is they don't know how to operationalize intent.
Right.
That's the biggest part, because they just sort of think and they feel they're doing the checkboxes, and then they're like, yeah, I'm doing it. And I hate this question today, but people still go back to, well, how do I know this helped me win the deal? We still are in the world where people are having a struggle whether this is a marketing led or sales led, rather than saying growth is a joint initiative. There is a sales and marketing alignment. And we sort of know in this world where 80% or 70% of the interaction is happening before someone comes to me, really, we're sort of shifting from a sales-led growth model to more marketing-led growth model. And if the two things are not aligned, you're just missing big time, right? So it'd be kind of interesting, maybe from a marketing perspective, Jackie, you starting and then Steve adding, where do you think are the challenges and gaps for people to operationalize? You talked about product marketing use cases, content creation use cases, product development use cases, sort of using the data to drive better nurture, yada, yada, yada. And those are not a person in an organization. Those are 6 or 7 different roles that could take that data and now operationalize it, right?
Right.
Where do you think are the gaps, and why do you think those gaps exist?
Yeah, I mean, I think, from our perspective, overall sales and marketing alignment is the holy grail. That is the key thing to having a true success in today's, sort of very automated buying, self-serve buying experience world. Because like Steve said, did you say 70% of the buying experience earlier as we were talking, that is kind of in that self-serve automated approach? Before you even get to a hand raise on a web page or a talk with a salesperson, there's so much that has to be, sort of taken into consideration. And you've got to be able to create that content to draw people in. You've got to be able to create the interactions that might align people. And so if your sales and marketing teams are not aligned, you're really going to be missing that completely. And I think intent is really a key sort of data driver across all of the different stages where sales and marketing can come together, right? You can see the progression as somebody moves through the account journey with you. And as they move from, sort of more marketing heavy stages to more sales heavy stages, you can see that intent and how it builds. And I think if your sales and marketing are not aligned, you're going to drop the ball. And like you said, Uzair, you're not going to be able to have that, sort of fly on the wall viewpoint. You're going to have a totally different conversation from one stage to another. So I think that's the sort of first hurdle to get past, is not having that connection of the data that flows throughout the whole journey, and connecting all of the different channels that you might be able to, be speaking with, be interacting with for sales and marketers together.
Steve, what about on the sales side? You talked about some pretty awesome use cases earlier about that you are taking this stuff, and you and John are working on, your CMO are working on sort of what accounts to prioritize, what are the signals, and you're passing that to your teams real time. But just because you're passing them real time, and I love the confidence that you have that your salespeople are using that data awesome, but are they really using it awesome? Or to me, that's everyone's gonna yeah, I'm doing this, but
Yep.
But our people know how to use it. That's where the challenge becomes, right?
Yeah, and I think that's where, like, when I think of intent openly, right, I think people think of intent as directional. Jackie, to your comment, right, we're going to refine a set of accounts, and we're going to figure out the go-to-market strategy. Uzier, you mentioned something. Let's just kind of hit the nail on the head with this, right? Deals don't just end because they hit a sales rep's desk, right? Like, we're talking about a 7 to 8 month buy cycle. And Jackie, to your point, people are going to do their research without me even before they ever want to talk to me. All right, we know that. Let's just get that out in the air. I think the thing that often is very lost with intent is that how does it become very personalized for the actual physical user? All right. Because, it's important to always remember, like, accounts don't buy, it's the people do, it's the buying teams that are within, right? It's the 4 to 7 specific people at accounts that are right now researching. They all have a job to do. They're all researching for a very pointed reason at certain variable points. And Jackie's right? You got to be in front of those people, because if you're not found, you're behind. When I say personalization, though, it's about the user and knowing what they're specifically researching on. But how do I get that information to my sellers so they can actually action on it? So look, who's there? I'm not going to sit here and say that, hey, all my guys, sales guys and gals, they hit home runs all the time. They don't, right? But it's this whole notion of when I'm going to reach out to Jackie as a prospect, or you, Uzair, as a prospect, is my touch point relevant? Is it relevant about your interests? Is it relevant about what you care about? Because if I'm doing that the right way, I'm gonna win more than I lose, right? Because you only have so much time in your day. You only are going to respond to so many emails. But the person that is personalized, that brings forward value, I'd make the case that they're going to win more than they're going to lose. So why do I see intent falling short? Is because I agree with everything we talked about. There needs to be sales and marketing alignment. Sellers as well as marketers need to be on the same page. The deals don't just originate when somebody shows up at a trade show, or they get a lead, or they land in a queue and turn into an opportunity. They've been going on for a lot longer than that. Jackie, to your point, how do I see that and how do I map it back? But then how do I help my sellers personalize that outreach, right? Because look, you personalize your outreach, you get in front of customers in a more timely way, and it's more relevant. You're going to win more than you're going to lose.
So can we double click on that? How do you do that? How do you get sellers to use this data? So a good example is, we started with the stat earlier. The more intent, the better, right? That's great. Yeah, it's awesome conceptually, but is it really? Because I don't know how to operationalize it. And what is happening in the market today is everyone saying, okay, I have all this intent data, and I show up in your Salesforce, and I'm a tab in your Salesforce, so you can access me where the account is. That I have 20 tabs that now I have to look through that has data from different, whether it's you all or Uber, Flip, or pick your MarTech sales tech stuff, right? Like, I mean, I think the latest number I saw was on average, enterprises have over 80 or 90 different MarTech or sales tech solutions, right? It's insanity. So and you guys are doing some cool things where you're sort of bringing stuff together, but back to the seller point, what does a seller need to do when they get an intent signal of someone is looking at X or Y, or their propensity is A or B? What is it that you're, maybe as an example of whether it's your team, Steve, or some of your best customers, what are they doing good, and what else can they be doing better?
Sure. So I think the first thing, right, that is a seller myself, right? And I would highly advise this for anyone who's in any level of leadership, and you think about, even my role. What's my role, right? I need to help my sellers get more out of their day. Very simplistically, right? I need to make them more efficient. I need to make them more effective. So as a seller, right, I should be working with my marketing leader to think about how I do that. So I'll give you a very practical example, right? Right now, when you think about an SDR outreach cadence, right, they have a couple different choices. They can elect to pull generic names out of their Salesforce system. They can go and source that data from, call it, contact databases. Or, right, even fortunately for TechTarget's data, we know the physical user that's right now researching. So we, Uzair, work with a lot of vendors, and we'll go, all right, so hey, you're going to build an SDR cadence. You can load one set of names in, which is essentially guessing, or you could load a set of people who have been researching in real time, and you can call down on those people. Now, I think most people would probably say that, hey, I'm going to lean in this direction, right? Where it becomes even more efficient and effective is when I explicitly know what to talk to Uzair about versus what to talk to Jackie about. Now, very practically, what we want to do and what vendors should be thinking about, and this is where our teams work, it's like, let's build some impactful outbound emails. Let's do it for the sellers.
Yep.
Let's show them the data, right? And then let's have them build it into a sequence where they can still achieve volume, but also achieve personalization. You do that, and again, I would make the argument that you're going to get more emails returned. You're going to have more effective conversations, right? So it just goes back for us, like sometimes very openly, you got to be willing to grind the gears, right? You got to be willing to do the system work. You got to be willing to sit down with your sales leader. You got to be willing to take advice from vendors like us, right? To hear best practices around how you should be thinking differently. Who's there, right? What Iron Horse is doing, trying to pull together the technology stack. Because, I think personally that over the next years ahead of us, technology stacks, right? Every vendor has their own value in a lot of different ways. The organization that's really going to succeed, and those that are going to succeed, will be the one that stitched together all of the value that each organization might bring discriminately to build a much more powerful and impactful go-to-market.
Jackie, you alluded to something. I want to go there because I think one of the key things that is, and you alluded to in your first intro kind of sort of overview of how you guys are connecting the dots better by aggregating more data sources. I think that's one of the cool things that demand-based allows you to do. I sort of kind of use the internal analogy of sort of that the modern ABM platforms are like neural engines. I'm sort of allowing to throw in a lot of data that goes in, and then it allows me to sort of say, okay, this is all the insight together. Now take this and North Star help drive unified account conversations across channels, right? That's the North Star. So that you are truly informing what you are doing. One, because back to, this is a bold statement I'm making. I don't have a lot of data to suggest it, but I think it's pretty accurate. I think more than 50 to, I'd say even 70%, and maybe that number was higher before, of marketing and sales effort is wasted. It's not directed. Okay, because we're sort of shotgunning it. We're not optimizing it. So, and I'd say marketing and salespeople have three strategies. It's more, and it's more. It's more budget, it's more tech, and it's more people. We keep going back to what's easy to us rather than saying, how do I better connect and stitch, right? So you applying and using data from top funnel, middle funnel, bottom funnel, whether it's your MOPS and CRM data, whether it's your G2 Trust Radius Gartner data, whether it's whatever other data sources that are there. I think platforms are improving. That was not possible today. Platforms are all getting better.
Right.
And you guys have ability to, both you all have ability now to sort of do person level targeting. So to me, I think that's a big gap today is people don't do a good job connecting the dots. And as a result, what they're seeing is tip of the iceberg.
Right.
They're just seeing a little bit, but there's a lot more they could be doing. So any thoughts on that from kind of sort of what you were seeing your customers do or what they're not doing?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things that's truly important, especially in the last, couple months as the economic climate has changed, is you've got to be able to do more, not with more, but with less. I mean, this is, not a new thing, right? And so the ability to be able to target somebody and take them through the entire account journey consistently, like you said, personalizing to them at all stages, being able to target the right marketing message based on what they're looking at, being able to then hand that off to your SDR to be able to create an email that has the right subject line based on, you saw them come to your website 5 minutes ago with this, this intent that followed them there. Maybe you don't want to, send them that SDR email right away after 5 minutes. It might be, coming into the creepy territory a little bit. Maybe you wait 15 minutes, but being able to target them with the right email subject so that they do open their emails, like Steve was saying, and then connect that then through to the conversation that you would have, the discovery conversation that you would have, and then taking it all the way through to what the salesperson who after a little while comes back on the phone and starts to talk to them about more in-depth conversations, having that thread that pulls all the way through is how you're going to be able to do more with less, right? Being able to have that consistently across the whole journey is going to be able to take us from the more spray and pray approach to being able to do more with less. And I think that's truly important, because it then feeds the full cycle again, so that when you're, when you've to take that even farther to the retention conversation, you can say, oh, in your retention conversation, hey, I've got, these people that I didn't even think about as part of my current retention buying committee, because they might be different from your acquisition buying committee. Those people are having this intent that I might not have been looking at too. So you've got to take it full circle as well, all the way through.
Yeah, I love that, and I want to go there with some of the conversations we had around sort of retention with Steve in a second. Why do you think the platforms have the ability to connect things? Why aren't people connecting things? What's holding them back? Because that's, to me, is the biggest gap. So, like, capability is there. Is it that vendors are not guiding people properly? Is it a organizational ownership issue because I only control X and not Y? Why is it that the possible is available today, but it's not being utilized? Is it a skill gap? Is it a organization issue? Is it a change management issue? What's holding people back?
My thought is that it's probably an organizational / change management issue. I think that a lot of companies, even though they might have moved to a more revenue focused talk, they still have very different systems, right? They've got their Marketo for this, they've got their CRM for that. They're very separated. There's not a lot of consistency between that, and that hampers that sales and marketing alignment. So I have a feeling that it's a bit of system, but it's probably also more in terms of the change management approach to how we're using these systems together and how we're sort of stitching everything together from a true baton pass, not a throw it over the wall kind of approach.
Awesome.
I think it's taking time. It's taking time to move to that.
Yeah.
So I want to pivot the conversation. Yeah, go ahead, Steve.
No, I was just going to say, I agree with that, right? Because I think that marketing is still somewhat separated, siloed from other organizational, inner teams, right? So when you think about it, right, I need to connect this to Salesforce, or I need to connect it to this nurture engine, or I want XYZ to work together. That requires a queue that's, quite frankly, probably very long. And at the same time, right, how do you prioritize this versus that? And it could take time, right? But this is the thing. I think that people need to commit to how they want to leverage intent across their full ecosystem. Like when you meet with vendors, you should share with them what your technology stack is. And you should ask them what inputs, what would they suggest that you could do? And it might not be easy. There's going to be things that are easy, and there's going to be things that are harder, but commit to what you want to do, and you're going to drive better outcomes from it.
One thing that we've found that is more success oriented is to have things where people live, right? So Steve, you talked about the 10 tabs in the CRM that are showing intent, or maybe it was there you mentioned that. But it's got to be where they live. Do they spend their time in the CRM, or do they spend their time in Slack, right? Maybe that's the key point, the first thing of integration that you put intent into. Do you put an alert into Slack or Teams, right? Rather than putting it into the 10 different tabs of CRM that will take, like you said, Steve, a number of months perhaps to get your IT department to even integrate it there. So how can you get started quickly in the places where they live? And maybe that is Slack and Teams and not CRM.
I think that's a great point. I think organizational is thing, but I think it's a change management issue. Yeah. I think even on the vendor sides, I don't think the customer success teams do justice working with customers. They're so me-centric rather than you-centric, you being the customer, you being this is your environment, this is your outcome, this is what you have, how do I cross-connect? What they're focused on is, I am vendor X, how do I make sure you're using vendor X? Rather than saying, how do I get you the best outcome with the environment you live in? So I think there is work for us to do. I think we're better sellers and not as good customer success people, because customer success view for us is still narrow rather than very customer centric. So I think there's evolution in the market. Before we go to sort of the next segment, I want to sort of do another poll, which is, we've been talking about different use cases. So it'd be kind of cool to ask kind of the participants about what is the next step with intent data? Like, what do they want to do? Where are they today? Do they want to, maybe if they don't have a ABM intent platform, maybe they need to purchase it. They have a platform, but they want to use it more comprehensively. They want to integrate additional data sources, or they're really struggling with just operationalizing what they have. We sort of talked about a few things that'd be interesting to see sort of what people say. Any thoughts, team, on sort of where you think the challenges are?
The top one that's popping up is the one I was thinking as well, operationalizing it, right? I think it speaks to that conversation we were just having about the change management. It's hard.
Yeah.
It's just hard to sort of get it through.
Yeah, I think operationalizing, right? We can talk about this because this is something I think a lot of people can do immediately, right? You get an intent ranking list from one vendor, you get an intent ranking list from another vendor. You should use both those intent sources to double verify the accounts, as well as inform that list if there are accounts that one vendor has versus the other. We have a vendor that we're working with, right? Then they're doing something similar to that, and they've increased their ABM campaigns by their opportunities by over 30%. And it's not rocket science, right? I'm literally taking two good intent sources and I'm verifying them, matching them together, and it's telling me which ones right now, quite frankly, I'm checking the box, right?
Yes.
That operationalizing
too much data,
systems,
right, Steve? There can never be too much data.
There can never, yes, I agree with you on that. I think the question is that operationalize. I think a lot of people, they go, oh, I got to get it integrated. And look, that's important. But what are the short-term steps that you can do quickly to share as well as build success? Because, if somebody came to me with a triple verified, double verified list of accounts that were right now in market, I'd be all over it as a seller. I'd have my sales teams definitely mobilize on it.
So let's kind of build on it. Jackie touched on it. I know we chatted about it in our prep, Steve. Protection. The term you used was protection, account protection.
Yep.
And as a use case, not just, we are, again, as marketers and sellers, obsessed with new logos. There's this insanity obsession with new logos. And the reality is new logos make up maybe, I don't know, Steve, you can, and Jack, you guys can, maybe 20 to 30% of our revenue. But 70 to 80% of revenue on an annualized basis comes from our existing customers. But yet we sort of treat them as second-class citizens in some ways, from a love and care and being able to grow them and nurture them and make them successful. So talk about protection. I think that was a great term that you used.
Yeah, I mean, I think that this is a very, very clear but also hopeful use case for intent as it further grows in just the industry, right? So to your point, everybody loves a new logo, right? I mean, it's just the nature. You ring the bell because it's a new logo. It's been added. If you think about intent in its very most simplistic form, it's all the accounts that are right now researching that you may or may not be aware of. More times than not, you're not aware of it. I think there is a vendor's belief that just because somebody's your customer, it means that you own them. It means that they only go to my website to do research.
Yes,
No,
that's awesome. Yeah.
Right. Quite frankly, they don't go to your website because they probably assume that what they're going to hear from your website is going to be exactly what they don't want to hear. They want to hear agnostic, third party point of view, things that they can help better inform their purchase decisions. So intent, especially in today's macro environment, like organizations, it's going to be harder to get acquisition logos, and it's going to be more valuable for companies today to grow through their current customers, to spend more time with them, be more impactful, right? Like think about a sales use case and say, Jackie, you're my customer, and I call you. I don't know what's going on in your environment. You're probably going to be a little turned off. But if I call you and I say, hey, Jackie, I understand that you're researching on XYZ. I'd like to spend some time and talk more about that, let alone acquisition. You already have a relationship with me, and I'm better informed to have a better sales conversation with you, or better informed to even service you based off of the need. So intent, right, for me, when I think about protection, load a customer list, right, into an intent solution, or and then organize that customer list, because you're going to see, you're probably very surprised that a lot of your customers are right now researching for other ancillary products and services that you might sell. They are researching with your competitors, which would be certainly a very large red flag for me to ensure that my marketing, as well as my sellers, as well as my customer success teams are paying attention. And we're seeing more and more customers do this on the tech target front, because they're coming to realize that like the research isn't with them, right? The research is going to happen without them. And in order for them to be data driven, they need to see it, they need to mobilize it, as well as they need to make sure that they prioritize it. And it's a very, very big thing that I think if a lot of organizations get right, they will succeed.
Yeah, I think you touched on it. Yeah, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
No,
I was just going to say, we have, okay.
No, go ahead. Latency of bandwidth.
Story of our lives these days, right? I was just going to say, we have a customer called Cypher Health who does exactly what you were just saying, Steve, right? Their customer success team uses intent to sort of figure out who's a potential churn risk, who's a potential upsell risk. They're trying, or not upsell risk, upsell opportunity. They're trying to figure out, sort of what are people looking at, maybe even people that are top users that they're already engaged with, these customer success folks, or maybe even not top users, but they could be, something that's that they need to pay attention to from a churn perspective. So they're very focused on looking at that as part of their, customer retention and customer success process.
So one thing I want to touch on, I want to move on to the last topic. I think from a competitive insights perspective for retention, but competitive insights perspective for also new logo acquisition, I think intent is phenomenal. Where we've worked with a lot of our customers to say, you can now, working through the neural engine analogy I talked about, get insights on your customers looking elsewhere, your customers looking at you and looking at others, which others, your customers looking at others and not looking at you, or prospects. And the ability to now be able to layer that in from a marketing perspective and sales perspective and customer retention perspective, phenomenal. I want to sort of bring it all together, kind of last few minutes, talk about, we've been so focused on intent. Intent is like a key ingredient in a recipe, right? I'm adding sugar to something that's a dessert, that's great. But if I don't have other pieces, I can only get sweetness, and that's it. And so how do I get the perfect recipe? And to me, I think there's two really interesting things. One is, we've been talking a lot about audience obsession. So understand your persona, obsess about who they are, understand their journey, and sort of layer that in. And another thing that, as we were talking about intent, just kind of I was thinking about, that is gold mine that most companies don't have in place or don't use properly, is telemetry data, how people are using their applications and what they are doing and what they're not doing. Again, from an insight perspective of what's possible. So let's talk about sort of, those are two things, but thoughts on how to make intent as a key ingredient. What else is needed to make intent-based go-to-market strategies and selling strategies more effective?
I mean, I just thought of an example from one of our customers. I'll bring them up again, but they're actually using, when you mentioned the product telemetry, they're actually using intent to figure out where to place stores. So what sort of geographic concentrations, where people are located, to where that heavy, sort of concentration of intent is coming from. Where should they place stores? Where should they place branches? It's kind of a unique scenario, but it's interesting, right?
Yeah.
Jackie, I think that's exactly where you're going with that. In my opinion, it's one, you got to be where your audience is for research, right? So Jackie, to your point, they're using that telemetry data to essentially say, hey, you know what, there's 5 spots they might be, but let's focus on these 2, because it's actually, this is where I know my buyers are showing up to do their real research. Uzair, that I think, in the end game, that's the most simple thing in my mind, right? You might have a great intent solution, you might have a great ABM list, but in the end, if all that research happens outside of me and I'm not in front of it, I'm losing, right? Yeah. I'm simplistically losing. So you got to be in the right spots, right? I think that's the first thing. You don't need intent for that. You just need to be in the right spots. The second thing is that it's content, right? Because like I might be in the right spot, but if I have a piece of junk content, or my content is 12 months old, or my content isn't about what this audience cares about, and they're researching, and they've got a choice. Let's be fair, right? They're going to look at 6 or 7 vendors. That's the hard reality that marketers face. So if I'm one of those vendors and my content isn't good, they're not going to download my asset. And by the time that I might find out about that as a seller, I always say this is even stuff I talk to my sales team about. If I'm calling on you at the 99th hour you've never heard of TechTarget, or you haven't engaged with my materials, I am behind. It's just the sad reality of sales today. With
You've
the
already
online,
almost lost, right?
Yeah.
well, the only way I win that deal, Jackie, I win it based off of price, and that is a terrible thing in any
It's not
sales.
a good spot to be in. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So I think doing intent right, like use the tools, use the solutions, use the telemetry data, make sure that you're thinking about how you're organizing your systems. You got to be in those right spots, because if you're not there, it doesn't matter the intent data you got, or quite frankly, the list that you produce.
With the right content. You don't just, not just in the right
Yep.
spots, but also with that exact right content, like you were saying, not just the right online spots, but even the right offline spots if you can.
Yeah, the number of times, we work with a lot of large customers where you'll see they're using the same ads or the same content for all types of people for all stages of the funnel. They are using information and they're like, well, we're doing things. I don't know why it's not working. And my best example, and I think I've shared this with Steve before, is we had a unicorn customer that got a bunch of intent data, and they're like, well, I called them twice, but they didn't answer. So I don't know if this is working. I don't know if this is the right person. And I said, you only call people twice, right? And you're done. So I think there's this mentality of
Who picks up the phone nowadays anyway?
right. I think Steve alluded to in the earlier conversation, instant gratification.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Holy grail. Intent is meant to be in their head that they will answer the phone call or they will answer the email and they will set up a meeting with you, rather than it just helping you be more efficient. And you still have to work hard. And I think that's the part that's a miss. It's sort of like intent is part of your portfolio marketing strategy. You still need to, if someone doesn't know you, it's the question I asked that sales leader was, I said, you are a unicorn, but does this customer know you? It's like, no. So I said, why would they answer your email to set up an appointment? You're nobody to them. They have no clue who you are. You may be the best at, but they don't know what that is. So it's sort of a really interesting strategy. So I think to me, I think there's key learnings are operationalization is a huge gap in the market. I think change management is a big miss if people don't do it. And really, I think the people need to take a portfolio approach where intent sort of informs all the different things that they're doing to get more out of it. It's not the magic pill. It's the magic pill that makes other things better. So I think that's sort of the core. So with that, let's sort of move to any questions. Ellen, what do we have? Do we have any questions from the audience?
We do. Thank you, Steve, Jackie, and Uzair for that conversation. Turning to our questions, Uzair, you were just kind of addressing this one, but if campaigns based on intent data are not working, what could be some of the issues and factors that are affecting that? Uzair, you kind of went into don't use the same content across the whole funnel. So can y'all kind of talk through one or two more points on that question?
Jackie,
I
start.
think it's a bit about, you can't expect them to, like you said, automatically give you a meeting without giving them something in return. And intent allows you to figure out what that give is or what the best give is, right? And so I think that's one of the things first that you've got to figure out. What is it that you're going to use as that carrot, right? To be able to get that meeting. That's important.
I think it's important to define working too, right? Like obviously, right? The end result is I need more revenue, I need more opportunities. That's why we're all in marketing as well as sales. But like, if I take an intent list and my SDRs and my callers are just naturally right now, right, 20% more effective because the accounts that they're calling pick up the phone. Well, that's a winning metric, because in the end, you do that over and over again. And if they're good, or quite frankly, you've got a good solution, you're going to produce more, right? So I think it goes back to something we were talking about. Define what you want to do with intent, and then consistently grind it and refine it and build the strategy over and over until you can replicate what is most successful for what you're trying to do.
Yes, I want to double click on the define part. I think one thing that we don't do a good job as a growth team is we shortcut the definition of what the conversation arc is with our prospects. what do they need? What do they know? The intent tells us some of the stuff they know, but we don't really define what is that conversation path that we want to take them down. So we just sort of throw stuff on the wall. And so it's just sort of, it's this, right? And versus there is a structured approach to giving them information they need to make a decision. Even if they have it, they can fast track themselves. And thank God we've gotten better at not gating the whole world, which is kind of the old marketing strategy of everything, right? Sort of like there's gating is, we've moved beyond that, hopefully. But I think that's a big miss. I think where you went, Steve, I think is the right structure. I feel there's so much loss in not having an understanding of the audience and defining how to talk to them so that they understand my value to them. And then I think what Jackie said earlier, I think is spot on, which is, to me, I'm a huge believer in give before you get. So what are you giving me in value as a prospect before you asking something back in return? And we've just gotten to such terrible habits. I mean, I get probably 30 emails in my LinkedIn in-mail every day about, hey, can we set up a meeting with you?
Yep.
And it's just like, there's no sense of relationship development, right? And so I think that's a miss. And I think for us to be effective, it's doing what you all talked about, but I think there needs to be a strategy and a definition of the conversation arc.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Perfect. Thanks. And Steve, I'm going to let you start with this question. How can you sift through so much intent data to find information you're looking for? Give us just one place we should start.
Not that I can ask the question for a question, so sorry. On the sift through intent data to start. Well, look, I mean, foremost, I probably prioritize, as a vendor, I prioritize my first party data to start, right? I prioritize my inbound web traffic. I prioritize where I'm actually placing cookies on our pages. Like TechTarget has our own first party data. These are people that are coming to our sites. But in general, right, like first party data for a vendor, especially if you have very specific product pages and you can organize your intent data by that, it's probably a good place for you to particularly start. Now, you're not going to get the critical volume because naturally, right, there aren't that many people always going to vendor web pages that are specifically looking at product specific information. But that's a pretty good nugget of information to start with. And then I would start to think about, all right, so now that I've harnessed that, what are these other secondary signals to a vendor that would add other additional scale that I don't see, right? Or that is relevant to where my buyers are actually.
I think I would only add to that the first party data is absolutely the best place to start, but then you can take that information and translate it into the keywords that you want to look at for your third party stuff too. So I think it can inform and help you for the next sort of expansion opportunity for that.
Wonderful. Well, that is all the time that we have for now. Steve, Jackie, Uzair, thanks for the conversation. To all of those that joined us on today's conversation, thank you. We will have our third roundtable coming up in December. We are going to put the link here to register in the chat. So make sure you join us in December. It's going to be around measurement and reporting. So we look forward to seeing you back then. And thank you all and hope you all have a good rest of your day.
Thanks all.
Thanks so much.
Hi, everyone.